Welcome back. We continue on with this next section, which has a lot of little bits of information. This is called policy, life insurance policy provisions, options, and riders. So we have provisions, things that are built into the policy, sometimes required by state law. Options that are built into the policy, which are actually protecting the insurance company. And riders are things that modify the contract, make it better for the insured. Usually are purchased at time of application. You have to pay an extra premium for them. And they basically provide additional coverages. So we start right at the top of page 41, going over ownership. Remember, as we said earlier, let's just give an example here. Okay, we've got dad and son. Son's the insured, dad is the policy owner. Now, this is a third-party ownership contract where we have three parties to the contract. We've got the owner, the insured, and the insurance company, obviously. Now, the owner has all rights to the policy, as I said earlier. The insured is the one whose death triggers benefits. So, in our example here, who pays the premium? Dad. If dad dies, is a death benefit paid out? No. Who designates the beneficiary? Dad. Well, if the son dies, that's when proceeds get kicked out. So you might wonder, why would you purchase life insurance on a child? Well, things happen. Child could run out in the street, get hit by a car, child could drown, all these horrible things could happen. Well, you have to bury the child. Well, funerals cost anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000. So if you want some money for that, buy life insurance on your child. So we have third-party ownership. Now, dad has the ownership rights. At some point in the future, we'll say that dad decides he wants to transfer ownership to the son. Dad can do that by making what's called an absolute assignment. So an absolute assignment is a permanent transfer of ownership rights. So when child reaches the legal age, 18 or 21, depending on your state, dad can transfer ownership to the son. So dad does. And remember, this is a juvenile life policy, so it's whole life. It's got some cash value, and we'll say the cash value is, $2,250, okay, is the cash value. And son gets the policy, and he reads the policy and finds out he can cancel the policy and get that cash value. And the cash value there is, in fact, just enough to cover that full body tattoo that he's always wanted. So son cancels the policy, uses that money to get the full body tattoo. Can son do that? Yes. Because if dad makes an absolute assignment, dad is no longer owner. Son is the owner / insured and has all ownership rights. So son can cancel the policy, get the money, get the tattoo. So say son does that, gets a full body tattoo with the $2,250, gets ink poisoning and dies. Is that covered? No. Why? Cancel the policy. No longer a policy there. Okay, so let's say that the son, talks this over with mom and dad, and they convince him not to cancel the policy and get the full body tattoo. But here's what son decides to do. Okay, son has a new girlfriend named Shania, and Shania has one of those brand new, they're really in now, one of the pink mohawks that she comes over and uses your sink to dye her hair in. So Shania and son have been dating for 3 weeks now, and son's in love. Okay, love of his life. And in fact, if he dies, he wants Shania to get the death benefit of his policy, which is $10,000 if he dies. So previously, dad was the beneficiary, but son calls up the insurance company and says, hey, I want to put Shania in with the pink mohawk as my beneficiary. I want her to get the 10 G's if I die. Can he do that? You bet he can. He's the owner. So he, obviously, if he wants to make that change or wants to make an assignment of any kind, he has to notify the insurance company, fill out the appropriate paperwork, and they have to countersign that in order for it to be effective. So he does. Now, before he does this, though, he talks to his parents, and dad says, well, look, son, I'm sorry, I thought that you were, going to be responsible enough to handle this, but obviously you're not. So I'm taking it back. I'm taking this policy back from you. Can the parent do that? No. Son is the owner of the policy. The only way dad's getting it back is if son made an absolute assignment to him, which the dad cannot force him to do. It has to be a willing thing. Okay? So on page 41, we have assignment number 1, absolute. Put a star by that. Probably a test question. Permanent transfer of ownership rights. We've got number 2, second type of assignment, collateral assignment. And a collateral is a temporary assignment. And it's usually when a person uses their life insurance as collateral to obtain a loan. Okay? So essentially, you would name a lender as a beneficiary in your policy. That lender has a lien against your life insurance while you have an outstanding debt with that lender. So once you satisfy that loan, then they are taken off and no longer show an interest there. Second paragraph from the bottom, remember I said neither one of these is binding unless the company has been notified. We go to last paragraph on page 41, entire contract. We mentioned this earlier back in general insurance. Entire contract states the policy when it's issued, plus what's ever attached, including the application, is contestable in court if something goes to court. And has to be attached when the policy is issued. That's why the insurance company will always attach that application. Top of page 42. Entire contract clause also states the policy once it's issued cannot be modified without mutual consent of both parties. We have the third paragraph down, right to examine, free look. This is your refund provision. Okay, remember we talked about this earlier in the life basics section. Certain number of days you have from when the policy is either hand delivered, is when it starts if it's hand delivered, or if it's mailed, it starts the date of mailing. And remember, it's sent registered mail, so you've got to sign for it to make sure it gets to you. But it's a period of time you have to return the policy and get a full refund of all premiums paid. If you don't return it during that period and you want to cancel it later, you might not get any of your money back. You might only get a portion of it. Payment of premiums, the fourth paragraph down on page 42. Mode of payment. Mode of payment is how frequently you pay your premium. Remember, we learned you select this on your application for insurance. Now, the more frequently you pay your premium, the higher your cost will be. The more frequently you pay your premium, the higher your cost. The cheapest way to pay your premium is going to be annually once a year. But more frequently, and more bills they have to send out to you, more work for them, you're going to have small service charges. It's sent right on top of that. Grace period, center of the page on page 42. You've got to know, number 1, how the grace period works, and number 2, how long they are. Okay, so we've got the grace periods. Let me explain what a grace period is, though, before we look at anything else. It's a period of time from when your premium's due that they will extend coverage. If you have a claim during the grace period, they will pay your claim minus your overdue premium. So the grace period starts the day your premium is due and you don't pay it. That's when your grace period starts. 3 grace periods. 28 days for industrial life. Remember, industrial life was sold by debit agents. Very small face amounts. Began first being sold during the Industrial Revolution. The main purpose was to cover the cost of burial with those policies. But remember, the debit agent went out and collected the premium every 7 days. 28-day grace period. Any other type of life insurance, including annuities, 30-day grace period. Group life, 31. And if you're going to be doing health insurance, that 31-day grace period is the only one that carries over and is the same in health insurance. Group health insurance also has a 31-day grace period. Okay, so I'll give you an example. Say I've got a whole life policy, $100,000 face amount. Premium is $200. Premium is due on 2/1. Don't pay my premium. Die on 2/10. Am I covered? Answer, yes. First question though, how long's my grace period? What type of insurance? Whole life. So it's individual policy. 30-day grace period. Am I within my grace period? Yes. When did my grace period start? Right here. Premium was due on February 1st. I didn't pay it. That starts my 30-day grace period. I die during those 30 days, which I did, I still have coverage. The insurance company will pay what dollar amount? $100,000 minus $200, $99,800 is what they will pay. Okay, so a couple things possibly related to grace period, but not too complicated there. Now, reinstatement, last paragraph on page 42. Okay, reinstatement is a different provision. It's built right in the policy. Okay, say I go through the 30 days here of my grace period and I don't pay my premium. What happens to my policy? It's over, or in other words, it lapses. No more coverage. Well, what happens if, say I was out of town, say I was doing that whole 80 days around the world trip, they do on those cruise ships or whatever. So I was out of town, obviously forgot to pay my premium for my life insurance. I get back in town and I noticed my policy's lapsed. They sent me a notice saying it was, gone. Can I get it back? Yes. It's called reinstatement. The insurance company has to allow me to apply for reinstatement. Now, there's two things that I have to do, though, in order to get my old policy back. Here's the two things. Number one, I've got to pay those premiums that I missed, plus interest. Number two, I have to go back through underwriting. If I can do those two things, I get my old policy back. Now, a lot of times the insurance company will limit how long I have to apply for reinstatement. In most states, up to 5 years that I have to apply for reinstatement. I can do both these things, they will accept me. Now, what's the benefit of getting my old policy back? The age. I may have bought this policy 15 years ago. If I was to go out and buy a new policy, the same face amount, it's going to be way more expensive. And plus, maybe I have a health condition now I didn't have when I originally bought it. So that's obviously going to be a big benefit to reinstatement. Okay, on page 43, top of the page, incontestability. Now, this is a provision built in the policy that's very restrictive for the insurance company because it states, incontestability, that after 2 years, the life insurance contract becomes totally incontestable, even for fraud. So, if I commit fraud at any time, say on the application, I die 2.5 years later, and the insurance company can prove I committed fraud, they can't deny the claim. They have to pay the claim. They have 2 years to figure out if I lied or not. So you can think of it this way for life insurance. Liars pray for 2 years, then they're covered. That's the incontestability clause. It's a little bit different in health insurance, but they might ask you on the exam what the incontestability clause is or how long it is. 2 years restricts the insurance company. Center of the page, we have misstatement of age clause. Now this is really a good one. This, again, protects the insurance company against somebody who lies. Now this, we just talked about incontestability clause and it's 2 years and yada yada. Well, misstatement of age clause applies throughout the life of the contract, forever. So let's say this. I'm selling life insurance and I have somebody come in that wants to buy life insurance from me. I live in Malibu, okay? And that's where my office is. And in comes walking in Dick Clark. Wants to buy some life insurance. He wants $10 million of life insurance. And he states on his application that his age is 60. And he lists down here his beneficiary, his goddaughter, which is Britney Spears. Okay, so we sell him this policy. We collect the premium, goes through underwriting, everything looks good. And policy gets issued and he starts paying his premium, which in part is based on his age, right? That's a big determinant in how much he's going to have to pay for his coverage. So we sell this policy and 10 years later, guess who comes knocking at the door? Britney Spears. Okay, she got rid of the loser, but she hasn't had a hit record in 10 years. You know, now she's with some new loser who's taken all her money. And she's crying for a number of reasons, but one of them being her godfather's dead. Her godparent, Dick Clark, he croaked. And she's come to see me. Why? To collect on the life insurance. She's waiting. She's got $10 million coming to her tax-free. Now, in order to get paid on a life insurance claim, you have to present proof of loss. And proof of loss in this situation is going to be what? Death certificate. So she has it. She's well prepared. She has a death certificate with her. And she presents it to me, and I look at this, and I get a little confused, because this is 10 years later from when I sold the policy. And back when I sold the policy, Dick Clark said he was 60 years old. Well, on his when they did his autopsy, it said that he was 90 when he died, which was 10 years later. Well, hey, that means 10 years ago he wasn't 60, he was really 80. He lied. How could he do that to me? Well, we'll get him back. What are we going to do? Well, misstatement of age clause goes into effect, and it states that we will reduce the only thing we have control over at this point, which is what we pay out. We're going to reduce what we paid out. We'll go back to the date he filled out this application, take out what he said he was, and insert how old he really was. and see how much in premium he was paying, would have purchased him had he told the truth. And we come to determine that instead of 10 million, it's only good enough for 2.5. And that's what we're going to pay Brittany. So she's mad. She's sad. She's kind of lost out here, right? Well, Dick should have told the truth. What's he lying for? Why would you lie and say you're younger than you really are? Cheaper premium, right? You want a cheaper premium. Oh, they'll never find out. They're going to find out. Okay, so that's misstatement of age. Applies to the life of the contract. Thing very important you need to know is what they do when they find this out. They're going to adjust the benefits. They don't mess around with the premiums at all. They reduce the benefits to what the person was paying, would have purchased had they told the truth. So in the center, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th paragraph from the bottom, or 6 from the top, right in the center of page 43, put a star right by that paragraph. We go on to the next page we skipped over exclusions, bottom of page 43. Exclusions are things that are never covered. So we talked about war, intentional acts. We had terrorism. It's going to be a big one. What else did they list there? Well, pretty much anything that you have as a dangerous hobby. So they'll exclude such things as student pilot, rock climbing, scuba diving. These are all dangerous things, okay? So the insurance company does not want to cover it. Now keep in mind though, if it's not excluded when you buy the policy, they cannot add it as an exclusion later on, okay? Without your consent. Because remember we said no modification of the policy without mutual consent of the parties. Top of page 44, we have suicide exclusion in the 3rd paragraph down. This is 2 years. Now remember, we talked credit life. We talked about credit life at the end of the last section. 6-month suicide exclusion. Life insurance, 2 years suicide exclusion. What am I saying? I'm saying if you have your policy for longer than 2 years and you commit suicide, you are covered. Okay? That's crazy. Well, yeah, it is, but they're trying to exclude a person who's down on their luck, going to buy life insurance, then killing themselves. If that happens, during the suicide exclusion, the insurance company will refund the premiums paid to the beneficiary as a goodwill gesture. You kill yourself, 2 years, and 1 day later, covered. Suicide exclusion. Center of page 44, we have beneficiary designations. Now these are very important, obviously. This is the person that we want to get our money if we die. Number of different choices we can make. We start out with individual designations. We have the per capita and per stirpes designation. This generally has to do with children, and we'll give an example of this. They usually don't get into it too detailed on the exam, but so that you understand, here would be the difference between per capita and per stirpes. Okay, say we have Dad up here, and Dad has 3 children, and child A has 2 children himself. So Dad has 3 children and 2 grandchildren from child A. Under a per capita designation, all these living children would share equally should they be alive, which means 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. However, under the per capita designation, if one of these children, such as A, dies, these 2 would step up to the upper realm there, and all 4 surviving heirs here would share equally. So instead of 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, we'd be 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, 1/4. They all share equally. That's a per capita designation. Now, difference between per capita and per stirpes, we'll list over here per stirpes. So we've got Dad, son A, daughter B, son C. Again, we'll say son A has A1 and A2 down here. These 3 children of Dad are alive. They share 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. However, under the per stirpes designation, if son A dies, his interest passes down and is split equally between his children. So it would go now 1/6, 1/6, 1/3, 1/3. Okay? So under per stirpes, they step up and take the position of the prior person. But under per capita, it is split equally between right down the family tree. okay, following that line. So the big difference between per capita per strip you need to know for the exam, per capita is always split equally between the beneficiaries selected. We go on to number 2, classes. Class designation of beneficiaries would be such as all my children. That's a very good example of a class designation. It's just split equally between all surviving children of the insured. 3, estates. The estate of the insured is going to be the final beneficiary, and if no other beneficiary is listed, the proceeds are paid to the insured's estate, and if that occurs, they are included in the value of the estate for estate tax purposes. So it's not really something you ever would want to occur. 4, minors. Minors can be named as a beneficiary if a guardian is appointed to receive the funds on their behalf. And then we have 5, trusts. Okay, maybe a test question on this. You could establish a living trust while you're alive to receive the proceeds from your life insurance policy when you die, or you could set up a trust to be executed upon your death, related to or by your last will and testament. Now, depending upon when the trust is creating, living or upon your death, there's a different name for the trust. If it's created while you're living, it's called an inter vivos trust. If it's created upon your death by your last will and testament, it's called a testamentary trust. But either one could be utilized. Let me go to the bottom of page 44. We have successions of beneficiaries. So we've got this line here, primary contingent. Now, probably, again, test questions here on this. So I'll give a little scenario. And we will say that I list my wife as my primary beneficiary. Okay, so my wife's name is Dawn, and my contingent is our son, whose name is Ryder. Now, I have a whole life policy with $500,000 face amount. Okay, so I've got primary and contingent listed. Now, the reason I have Dawn as my primary is because she's my first choice of who gets my money when I die. The reason I list the contingent is the contingent's a backup. The only way the contingent beneficiary will get the money is if the primary beneficiary dies before I do. So the primary beneficiary predeceases the insured. Okay, so Ryder, here's my son, he's a backup. Okay, so let me give you an example here though. We'll say Dawn and I, we just got married, and Ryder, he's very young, he's 6 months old. And from Dawn's previous marriage, she has a son named Wolfgang. And her will states that when she dies, that her estate is to pass on to Wolfgang, 100%. So she hasn't updated her will since we've been married, which we've been married about 8 months now. Okay, now let's make up a scenario here. Now remember, Dawn's my primary, Ryder's my contingent. $500,000 whole life policy. Okay, so we decide we're going to go on vacation. Dawn and I, we're going to leave Ryder at home with the grandparents. Dawn and I are going on vacation, and we take a train ride to San Francisco. On the way, the train derails. I die instantly. Dawn gets impaled by a metal rod and ends up in the hospital, where she lives for 14 days and then dies. Well, let's look at how this impacts my life insurance. Now, I die immediately. Who's my primary beneficiary? Dawn. Who's the money go to? Dawn. Dawn dies 14 days later. Proceeds are included in Dawn's estate, which goes where? Wolfie. Wolfie gets that money, $500,000. What's Ryder get? 0. No parents, no money. Very unhappy boy. Now, these proceeds were from my life insurance policy. I don't want Wolfgang to get them. I don't like Wolfgang. Nobody likes Wolfgang. Well, okay, I've got this $500,000 policy. What's going to happen? Well, this is a situation that occurred in real life, this exact situation. So, the insurance companies created what they call on page 45 the Center Common Disaster Clause. Common Disaster Clause states if the insured primary beneficiary dies a cause of the same accident, regardless of what really happens, it is always deemed the primary beneficiary predeceased the insured, protecting the contingent beneficiary. So in my example, Dawn died within a certain number of days. This Common Disaster Clause goes into effect. Wolfgang doesn't get the money. Ryder gets the money. That's who I wanted to get the money. So he's not happy, but he's not quite as sad because at least he's got $500,000 in the bank, provided courtesy of Daddy. Okay, that's the common disaster clause. Notice though in the book, it will only go into effect if the primary beneficiary dies within a certain number of days. So Don's in the hospital for 6 months and then dies. We go back to that old scenario that I talked about before. It has to be within a certain number of days. So that's right in the center of page 45. The top of page 45, number 3, final beneficiary, that's the estate of the insured. As we said, nobody else is listed. It's included in the estate. Second paragraph down, revocable versus irrevocable. These are additions that you put onto your designations. If you want to be able to have full control over the designation and change it at any time, you list somebody as revocable. And that's 99.9% of designations. You change them anytime you want. So if Don and I get in a fight, in my example up here, I say, hey, you're out. You're no longer getting the money. I want Mike, my best friend for life, I want him to get that money. Yeah, I can do that. Now, conversely with that other designation, revocable, I can only change with their consent. So if I name Dawn as an irrevocable beneficiary designation, I can't change her without her consent. So why would I want to do that? Well, maybe I have Alzheimer's and I'm losing my capacity. And I don't want somebody to trick me into changing her out of the beneficiary. Well, if I name her as irrevocable, then they would have to get her consent as well. Or a lot of times you see it in court proceedings where the policy is deemed community property. The judge might make one person name somebody else as an irrevocable beneficiary in the policy. So that's maybe where you see that. Spendthrift clause, towards the bottom of the page right above settlement options. Spendthrift clause you might see on the exam. This is something that protects the policy proceeds from the creditors of the beneficiary and also keeps the beneficiary from spending all of the money at once. Now, this only applies, let me restate that. This will not, the spendthrift clause will not apply if the policy proceeds are paid out in a lump sum. It only applies if any of the other options are selected as far as settlement options, which we'll learn about right at the bottom of the page. But take a look there in that paragraph. Spendthrift clause protects life insurance policies that have not yet been paid out to a named beneficiary from the claims of the beneficiary's creditors. So as we said, if it's paid out in a lump sum, spendthrift clause does not apply. Bottom of the page on 45, we have settlement options. Okay, so here we get back to the situation here. Say Dawn's still alive. When I die, she gets $500,000, okay? How does she want to take it? She's got different choices. They're called settlement options. Now, I, as the owner of the policy, could predetermine a settlement option I want Dawn to take. Most of the time, though, it's selected by the beneficiary. And most of the time, most common settlement option, cash. Now, if Dawn selects the cash settlement option, remember we just said spendthrift clause will not apply. But also, will she have to pay tax on any of that money? What do you think? Answer, no. She will not have to pay tax on any of that money. Life insurance, policy proceeds are tax-free. So we have the different options that we need to know. Bottom of page 45, we've got cash. Very straightforward. Interest only. Okay, here's an interesting one. Dawn says, keep the $500,000 and pay me 6% interest or whatever the insurance company's offering at that point. They hold the money and they pay her interest. They have to pay it at least annually, but possibly on a monthly basis. The interest paid to Dawn is taxable as ordinary income. The interest paid is taxable as ordinary income. Okay, so we go on to the next page, page 46. We have fixed period installments, another choice that Dawn has. She could say, I want you to pay this money out to me over 20 years. By the end of the 20th year, I want the money completely gone. Next one's fixed amount. So Dawn specifies she wants a fixed dollar amount, $2,500 a month. There's that option. And then we have annuity. This is where annuities came from. So the next section we cover here in the course is going to be all on annuities. Probably be about an hour or so long. And this is where annuities were created by life insurance companies as a way to keep the money. Now the insurance company, they know they have to pay the money out, but they want to keep it. So Dawn could turn around and say, okay, I want you to hold that money and I want you to pay me a certain dollar amount over to me the rest of my life. The insurance company loves that. Okay, they get to hold on to that money instead of cutting Dawn a check for $500,000. So we'll talk much more in detail about the annuity later on in the course, the next section we cover.